Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and in this mini-series, we're adding music and sound to our game. One of the most commonly neglected things during early development is definitely audio, and yet there's almost nothing you can add to your game that will make it feel more immediately polished. So in this video, we're going to look at how to add music to our game. We'll set up dynamic changes to music when you change scenes, we'll create a nice little fade effect, and we'll also add the ability to trigger special music for new areas or boss fights. That's where we're headed in this video. Let's get started. As a disclaimer, while this series will have good stuff for pretty much everyone, I should note that we will be using the registry and room transition manager that we set up during our scene persistence series. If you missed that, check it out. Now the first thing we'll do here is actually get our audio manager set up in the hierarchy. So let's right click and create an empty object. We can call this one audio manager, and let's just drag it into our bootstrap as we will want this to persist between scenes. While still on the audio manager, let's add a component. This one's going to be our audio source, and this is going to act sort of like the stereo in our scene. It's going to be the thing that actually plays the music for us. For now, let's just head down to our assets folder where we can create a new folder for our music. I'm going to go ahead and drag some music in here, and if you don't have any music right now, I recommend going to a site like Pixabay, which has loads of free music available. I'll leave a link in the description. Now the absolute simplest way to get music playing is simply to go to your audio source and drag in one of those songs. So long as play on awake is clicked, it will begin to play as soon as you start the scene. That said, this is fairly limited, as when we move scenes, it'll just keep playing the same song. Or if you happen to have your audio manager in just one scene, then it will just play that song within that scene. This doesn't allow for fades or dynamic changes. So then, let's create our audio manager script. I'm going to create a new folder here called utility, as I'm not going to have a whole bunch of music scripts and it'll probably belong with other things down the road. We can then create our mono behavior script and call it audio manager. Now inside of here, we won't need our start or update method, so we can go ahead and get rid of those. So the first thing we're going to need to be able to do is talk to our audio source. So let's create a serialized private reference to the audio source, and we'll call this one music source. Later on, we'll have a separate one for our different sound effects. Now traditionally in short Unity tutorials, they would turn this into a singleton and make it an instance. That said, we've got a better way since we've created a registry pattern. If you've been following along throughout our progression series, you will have this service locator script, which allows you to register objects so that other scripts can then just get them when they come into the game, which is going to make our life a lot easier. So here, in Awake then, we will set our service locator to register this script. If you want to keep this nice and compact, you can get rid of the curly brackets and just use a lambda expression so we get it all into one line. Next, let's create the method that will allow other scripts to actually play music. So we'll make this public and call it play music. It's going to take in a few different parameters. First of all, it needs to know which audio clip we want to play. We'll have a float here for volume, and we'll set it to 1 by default, but this will allow other scripts to send in music that's quieter if we want. Finally, we'll have a fade time float here. We'll set this one to 0.5 seconds, but again, it can be overridden by different scripts, so if they want to have an extra long or short fade, we can make that happen. Now then, if our music source, so the one in the game, the audio source, has a clip already and it happens to be the same clip that just got passed in, we want to return. So if we move to another room that plays the same music, we don't need to start that song over again, we can just let it keep playing. Because we're going to be adding fading, we're going to need a little more control over time, so we're going to use a coroutine for this. We'll call this one the play music routine, and when we call it, we'll just pass along the clip, volume, and fade time data. We can then go ahead and create that coroutine, so this is going to be an IEnumerator, and it's going to be called play music routine. We'll need to accept the audio clip as well as the floats for volume and fade time. Now in order for our script to know what to do with the IEnumerator here, we're going to need to add the namespace using system.collections. Now eventually we'll add all of our fade logic here, but for now let's just do a test so we can get this working. So whenever this is called, we just want to set our music source's clip to be the clip that was just passed in, and then we want to tell our music source that it's time to play that clip. Now before we test, I want to add one more defensive move, and this is just to keep us from running into an issue where a single trigger multi-triggers and we end up having coroutines step on top of each other, which can create stuttering in the music. So all we're going to do for this is just make a private coroutine reference to our music routine, and then when we start this routine, we'll store it in this music routine variable. All this does is give us the ability to make it so that if the music routine is not null, meaning there's already a music routine going when we call the fade, we stop that routine before we begin this one. Now if we run this as is, we will get an error in Unity as an enumerator needs to return some sort of a value. And for now, we'll just put yield break in here. Now then, we're very close to being ready to test, except that we aren't currently telling our audio manager to actually play any music. For this, we're gonna just take a look at one of our rooms where we have this room service script. This sets up our room by hooking up things like our camera confiner and our parallax, and it's a great place to also add some data like what music to play when we enter that room. So let's go ahead and open that up. This part's going to be extremely simple. At the top here, we just want to make sure that we add a public audio clip for the clip that we want to play when we enter this scene. Then over in our room transition manager, we're simply going to be able to head down here into our transition method, and right at the same time that we're setting up the room with its confiner and parallax and all of that stuff, we can simply talk to our service locator, get the audio manager, and then make sure that we play the music for this room. And here we'll just use the service reference, which talks to that room service script. Back in Unity then, I can go to my room service and just drag in the song that I want to play when I enter this scene. I'll then need to grab another room from the game. I'll grab room 2 here, then inside we'll go to its room service and drag in a different song so that we can actually test the music changing as we switch scenes. We'll want to make sure that we actually click on the audio manager and add the audio manager script. Then drag this audio source down into the music source. With that done, we can go ahead and remove the bootstrap scene, hit play, and when we get in the scene, we'll hear our music playing. When we switch scenes, we'll get a change in music, and we can go back and forth as quickly as we want, and there should be no stuttering. That said, it is a little bit of a harsh cut, so let's go ahead and add some fade. Back inside the audio manager, let's come down into our play music routine, coroutine. First of all, I didn't add a volume control here, so let's just add that now, giving our music source's volume the value of whatever volume gets passed in. Now let's do our fade. So at the very top, we want to start by fading out the old music. So we will yield return, we'll wait until a fade is done, and this fade is going to have the target value of 0 volume, and we'll pass along the fade time so it knows how quickly to do this fade. We'll then create another coroutine, we'll call this one fade, and it's going to take in a float for the target volume, as well as a float for the amount of time that we're going to fade over. Inside of here now, we'll just make a float, which will be our start value, and it'll just look at the music source and find out the current volume. We'll also make a float for the time that has elapsed while we've been running this. Then, we'll have a while loop, where as long as the time elapsed is less than the duration that was passed in, we want to keep looping. In here, we'll increment our time, having it go up by the change in time between each frame. And then we'll make sure that our music source has its volume lerp, or linear interpolate, between two values. It'll go from the start value to the target value. And each frame, it'll just evaluate how far into the fade it should be, and it'll do this by taking the current elapsed time and dividing it by the duration. At this point, then we'll just yield return null, which will just wait to the end of the frame, and then go back into this loop again. Once we finish the loop, however, and our time is up, we'll make sure that our music source's volume gets set exactly to the target, so if we're off by a fraction at all, it'll correct that. Finally, back up in our play music routine, we can then fade in the new music. We'll do this with another yield return fade. The only difference is that this time, our target is going to be whatever volume was passed in by the script that called this, and again, we'll pass along fade time. Now the good news is it's as simple as that. No additional scripting or setup in Unity. When we get in, we should now be able to move between scenes with the new music fading in and the old music fading out. That said, I'd like to add a little something where when we get close to some sort of a threat, we can trigger special music. So let's go ahead and set that up. So first off, back in our utility folder, I'm just going to create a new mono behavior script and call this one music trigger. Then I'm going to head into a room where I actually want to make a trigger, in my case room 2. Here I'll create an empty game object, which I'll call music trigger. And then I'm going to add a box collider 2D game object onto it. I'll then drag it into wherever location I want this trigger to be. Make sure to expand it to a size so the player can't miss it. And then set it as a trigger. I'll then just add the music trigger script on top of this and open it up. Now inside of here, we can get rid of our start and update method right off the bat. Then we'll just make a serialized private reference to the audio clip we'll call it music clip, that we want to play. We'll then make another serialized private reference, and this one's going to be a float so that we can pick our target volume. We'll also need a private bool here called hasPlayed, and this is just going to track whether we've started this so that we don't try to start it multiple times and end up with it cutting itself off. Now then, whenever we enter this trigger, we want to check first of all to see if the clip's already played, and if it has, return. We also want to look at the collision object that just entered this trigger and compare the tag to see if it has a player tag. Notice I put the exclamation mark here, so if it is not the player, then we also want to return. We don't need to play the music when something else enters this trigger. Once we've confirmed that the clip is not yet played and that the player's entered, we can then talk to our service locator and just get the audio manager. We're going to store that variable, so in front, we can just make a local variable for the audio manager and call it audio. Now then, if our audio is null at this point, meaning we couldn't find it, we could do a return here to keep from getting errors. That said, I actually personally like getting this error message as it tells me something went wrong, so I'm just going to leave that out. Then we can make sure that anytime this runs, we tell our audio manager to play music, and we pass along the audio clip as well as the music. We'll also make sure at this point to set hasPlayed to equal true, so that we can't try to re-trigger the music again once it's already begun. Back in Unity, we can click on our music trigger, make sure to drag in the song we want to play, and give it a volume. I'm going to put this one at full volume. If you want, you can also drag this trigger up and put it on the enemy himself. That way as he moves, the trigger will also move, so it'll be more the proximity to the enemy that triggers than a specific spot on the map. With that done, I'm going to remove the bootstrap scene, and let's give this thing a try. Alright, as soon as we get in the scene, we can hear our music playing. If we move towards the exit, we can go through, we'll notice a fade out, the new music fades in. And also once we get close to the enemy, we do in fact trigger that boss music. We can then head in for the fight, and at the moment I don't have anything to turn the music off, so we'll keep playing. That said, once we go back to the original scene, we'll fade out that music, go back to our normal music, and coming back in here, of course the boss music is done, so we just get the scene music. Alright, I hope you found this one helpful. In the next video, we're going to show how to do something similar, but this time with sound effects. Hope to see you there, but until then, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.